Oh, with the, yeah, 4 minutes, okay.
Where's that signing thing?
Morning, councillor staff. Welcome to our special meeting for the 11th of October. We have one agenda item here today. I believe Councillor Fredman will be a little bit late. We have a couple of absences. Any disclosure of interest before we continue, councillors? No, great. We'll move on to item 3.1, the petition request for alternate venue for the music festival. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you're aware, Council has standing orders regarding the presentation of petitions. This report is the presentation of a petition. We have received a petition regarding an event to be held at the Rainbow Beach Sports Club. That event is a music festival with between 1,000 and 2,000 people expected to attend, and the local residents are opposing Council's decision to essentially allow the event to occur. We're recommending, and the report will take as read, that Council note the petition and delegate the CEO to respond.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Polly.
So are we meant to be discussing that now? We're just, like we noted it, but yeah, okay. And we're just going to pass it on here to discuss whatever.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're more than happy for you to ask questions or seek information around the report in order for you to appropriately and adequately delegate to the CEO to correspond. Councillors should understand the circumstance, but if the report is adequate, then there's no need for questions, but if you do have questions, we're more than happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, I had...
Assuming you have a question.
Yeah, so as I understand, reading the conclusion, it's a little bit late for this one, but you're going to be looking at future events. Is that the way?
Council currently has a policy that's premised around some legal advice that Council have received historically, whereby if there is an application in process, it is very difficult for us to enforce action against that application because Council hasn't determined whether it's approved or not approved. So we shouldn't be undertaking any enforcement action. In this case, the group have had a pre-application meeting. That means that they are in an application process for a development approval, and we will, under that basis, allow it to continue. We will apply conditions. Now, those conditions, I say we'll apply conditions, those conditions are more of a guidance in this instance, but they would transfer through to the assessment of the development approval application. If they can't manage the event successfully, we will take that into consideration when we're assessing the future development approval.
Okay, sorry. And second question was, as I understood, petition's not, it's just don't let it happen in a residential area. It wasn't suggesting alternative venue as such, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe the petition does suggest an alternate venue, but we have had extensive communications with the main proponent of this petition.
Yep.
She's been talking with Mr. Rogers, which is why he's here, as have the Rainbow Beach Sports Club, and they have suggested that the event move to the centre block. Those councillors who know Rainbow Beach reasonably well will understand there's a block of land adjacent to the community centre, commonly known as the centre block. It is a suitable venue for this type of event. Unfortunately, the logistics don't really work for the Rainbow Beach Sports Club at this time. However, longer term, we believe that may be a more suitable site.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Miller.
Another question? Oh, you right?
No, you're all right.
Oh, mine's about a receiving process. It's probably for the CEO. I believe this petition was submitted to council some time ago, and I'm just wondering why it's taken so long to come to. It's supposed to by standing orders. It's come to an ordinary meeting, but we've called a special meeting. So I'm just asking about the process behind that and why it's a delay.
I can take that first through the mayor. We're not sure of the exact cause, so we're looking into that now. Where we've also the director has put in protocols so that it won't happen again, so that petitions get a specific trigger to go to the meetings earlier. So, in terms of your first question, the second one is just regards Councillor Polly's question. There was 3 alternate venues suggested in the letter that they had.
Right.
One was the Centre Block, Community Hall. The second one was Cricket Oval, Carlo Road, and then the bottom car park of the Surf Tower. Just, you know. So with regard to this particular one, the special meeting is as a result of trying to get things done quickly. We may actually have to call another meeting to look at things, but we'll work that out once we get the decision of council today.
Councillor Morgan?
The petitions, it states where the signatures are, where they reside. Are they like Rainbow Beach people or outsiders?
Majority are.
Majority are, yeah. Which is 27
Seven, yeah.
27 of 1,300 residents.
Any other questions, councillors?
Oh, just
Councillor
one out of the report. It does say it had previously held 2 events there of the simulation on site. Were they events that were authorised events, or they just held the events under these circumstances not knowing?
Through you, Mr Mayor, they held the event under the circumstances of not knowing, to a large extent.
And they have a current licence that enables them to do that.
This is the 2021 event. Yeah, so the Rainbow Beach Fishing Classic event, which is what Mr Rogers just referred to, that has a permit.
Yeah.
However, they did have an event in 2021, I believe 2020 or 2019, which was a similar, smaller scale music event. Those events didn't have development approvals. And didn't, to the best of our knowledge, have a local law permit either, which they could have had the first one with a local law permit. But there may have been less than 1,000 people originally, and they don't need a permit for less than 1,000 people.
They don't need.
No. So if you have an event with less than 1,000 people, and it's the first event in the site, don't need anything. If you have more than 1,000 people, you need a local law permit. And then if you have a second event, currently, if you have a second event at the site, and there's some openness about the legislation, interpretation around the legislation, then it is deemed to be a development approval, or it is development and you need development approval. In this instance, they had 2 events. We don't know the size of either of those 2 events. The first one was probably legal and or may have needed a development permit, a local law permit, but they've never had anything for the 2 music events.
Councillor Smith?
Were there any complaints after the first 2 events?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we don't appear to have any on-record complaints of events about those music festivals. We have had a number of complaints regarding both anecdotal and in writing regarding from similar people on the petition regarding the Fishing Classic noise and the potential for music fest.
It was mooted at one stage that council was going to allow 1 event per year without having a MCU. That's just the natural death, is it?
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's what I was just explaining. So you can have 1 event per year per land holding, more than 1,000 people. That requires a local.
But that if they have the Fishing Classic and that's OB1.
That's correct. That's why we've deemed that this needs development approval, because it is more than the Fishing Classic.
Yep.
The Fishing Classic is interesting, through you, Mr Mayor, in that it actually, although the club have never requested it or asked for it, under the legislation, it probably has existing use rights. Technically, it has development approval. The club would have to request that if there was ever a complaint and a challenge to that. The club would have to request those existing use rights, and officers are reasonably confident that we will be able to approve those existing use rights based on the length of time that event's been there. We'd have to check the scheme, the preceding schemes, going back to 2005, but we believe that that particular event, the Fishing Classic, would have existing use rights. So we've never really gone into any depth around that.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Waldorf?
I was just thinking out aloud, it'd be interesting to hear an opinion from our Economic Development Officer on the pros of these events compared to the cons and the, just in the terms of figures and what it brings to the community. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Andrew Quinn is not here, he's our Economic Development Officer. We can talk anecdotally to that, if you like, and say that it is of significant benefit to the community in the number of bed nights and residential stay people coming in. A lot of people will come in for these events. They do put money into the local community, but they also do cause limited disturbance. On a short-term basis, officers, when reviewing the development approval for this, believed it's a minor change, not even a major material change.
Yes.
So it does have an economic benefit to the community. We can't quantify that, and I'm not sure Andrew could either, but we could do some work if councils were interested.
Yeah, because we're just stepping into that 1,000 people, I guess.
Easily calculated,
Yeah.
councillor.
Whether you're counting bodies or heads.
Any other questions, councillors?
Where are you counting one?
We have a recommendation there before us. Is there someone to move? Councillor Polly, someone to second. Councillor Smurden, Councillor Polly to speak.
No debate for petitions?
What's that?
The standing orders, there's no debate for petitions? Receiving petitions? No debate is allowed?
We've had our debate and discussion.
No, we've had questions. In the standing orders, there's no debate for petitions. It's just the recommendation moved, seconded.
Well, I'm happy for the councillors to speak.
Are you moving that we suspend the standing orders?
Councillor Mill, let's just get through it.
Well, we have a process.
I know we have a process, and we've been very flexible over the last 3.5 years, and you have been one person that's benefited from that flexibility. I mean, if we want to go back to dictatorial style meetings, which we've had in the past, we stifle discussion, we stifle debate, and the community is the one that misses out. Now, we've had a good conversation around this. I can't imagine Councillor Polly or Councillor Spurden are looking to have a long-winded, representations on this. It's a very simple motion. I'm sure they just want to speak to the community, and I think they should have that opportunity just to make some references to the community if they feel necessary. And if councillors are not happy with that or feel that we shouldn't, give councillors the opportunity to either speak to the recommendation, that's something we can consider. But, I mean, it's about a democratic process, and as I said, we've been very, very flexible in this space, and I don't see any need to change that today. So I'm happy for the councillors to speak on the recommendation. I'm happy for any councillor to speak on the recommendation, including you if you wish. Councillor Polly?
Yep, and just to confirm, I'm recommending 1 and 2, we're not splitting these, so.
No, we're
Good. Okay, I just say it's a valid petition. I don't understand the process isn't delayed, but on behalf of the council to the public, we do apologise that it got missed somehow, but here it is, and I'm very happy to now hand it over to the CEO to review it and respond to it.
Councillor Smith.
Okay, Councillor Polly's words. Council receives many petitions. All petitions have to be considered, but there is always two sides to an argument. So I'm happy to hand it over to the CEO.
Any other speakers for or against? Councillor Polly to close.
Happy to proceed.
With that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr. CEO, for correcting me.
Thank you, Mr. Burns, for speaking. It's taking me mine.
That concludes our special meeting. We'll have a quick adjournment. Do we need to change anything with the live stream?
We can keep going, Mr. Mayor, if that seems.
Yeah. Well, we'll head straight into our open workshop.
It's on the processes.
We'll begin our open workshop with item 1.1, the draft arts and cultural strategy and public art policy.
That's my only question.
So you're waiting.
Well, I wonder how many people. I think that's what the big thing is. How many can fit on site? But that's not relevant to what the petition wants, so it wasn't a relevant question.
Who we hear that?
You know,
Andre's on the stairs.
that was totally.
CEO.
Okay, do we want to just postpone this item until Andre's able to?
Yeah, I can check.
Yeah, right, and that's okay, we've got enough other items. Item 1.2, delegation from the acting CEO. I'll hand over to Mr. Lewis and Ms. Hatch.
Morning, Mr. Mayor.
Can I just suspect that? I don't know.
Christine. Thank you. So this morning we're talking about the appointment of an acting CEO and how we want to progress moving forward, or reflecting on how we've done it in the past.
Who? Right. Sorry.
Beg your pardon?
Oh, I missed that we skipped one. Sorry.
Yeah, we missed.
Yeah. That's all right.
There's a few things done on this.
Sorry.
Okay, so just go over. So the power to appoint the acting CEO is in legislation. We'll look at industry practice between a board and management and how that works, because it does relate somehow in respect to the CEO's position. We'll look at advice received by local government, so what other councils are doing in this space, processes used by other councils, managing confidential information, and that's more about if someone was proposed to be acting, if they had disciplinary action and things like that, how would we manage any sort of confidential information, and then capturing the duties of council. So that's the section of the Act there, and I think a lot of where the conversation comes up is the local government may appoint, but when you delegate, then a person becomes, the person may appoint. That's the delegation. So I think that's where some of the confusion, or what we have to unpack as to what council wants to do, is around a lot of those words there. Next slide, please. Thanks. So in industry practice for a board and management, in the governance space for a board, they appoint, evaluate and guide and support the CEO, so that is the role of council, and also succession planning of the board and the CEO. Thanks, Doug.
I knew I had a purpose.
So the legal advice, this came from King & Co, and they deal with many councils across Queensland. And they're saying that there is no obligation or no statutory obligation for council to delegate. It is written in the legislation for certain purposes, but there's no obligation. The Act clearly empowers the council by resolution, as opposed to a delegate making the decision. So even if the decision's made, it still comes back to council. Operational and or governance reasons, if the CEO's position becomes vacant, that's probably what is the intention of council to appoint an acting CEO. Is it something, if you don't want to have a ship without a captain, basically. So if there is operational reasons why you would want a CEO appointed and have that pre-prepared as to how you would do that, that's probably where the decision and the unpacking has to go for what you want to do as a council.
I think the overarching issue there is council has to have a CEO at any point in time.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So in respect to the recruitment process, there is no prescribed advice on the recruitment process. How council wishes to do that, whether it be a committee review on there, or the whole lot, like however you want to do the actual recruitment process, it's not stipulated in the legislation. The power to appoint can be delegated. Delegation can be to a named person or position holder. And the delegation does not prevent the delegation, even though you have a delegation, doesn't mean you have to use it. You can go back to council to do it, you can have both. Does that make sense?
I guess that applies to the the previous appointments of acting CEOs. Council had already delegated the power to appoint, but the Mayor brought both of those appointments back to full council.
For resolution.
For resolution.
Yeah.
We've done 3, haven't we? Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
that have gone through in this term has been.
Or by resolution.
Yes.
By resolution.
Yep, and the decisions, regardless of the voting, the decision at the end is what's recorded on the resolution.
I guess
Yeah.
the point is, there was an existing delegation that the mayor could make that decision. He chose not to, chose to bring it back to full council for resolution.
And in all the advice, one thing that's consistent is encourage to consult with everyone. Okay. The delegation may be subject to conditions, and we'll look at some of those that you might want to put in. A delegation can be revoked by resolution at any time, so if you want to revoke it and just keep it at the council level, that's fine too. And the current delegation that the mayor has did not stipulate any conditions. So this information was taken from one of the advisors who goes around to all the different councils and looked it up for us. Pretty much when we talk about conditions and what we want to think about is mayor makes the decision, and it's a good practice to consult like I had explained. You can do a retrospective motion, so if a decision is made, you can go back and do it like if it was urgent and had to be done quickly. Committee may be formed, delegation to mayor with conditions, that everyone's happy with the conditions. There can be a short-term arrangement that's proposed, and there is some examples like a week or less than a week, 2 to 4 weeks, 4 weeks plus or indefinite. So just depending on what you want to cover, to make sure that you're happy with as a council, so that there is always a CEO in charge at any time. Now, in regard to confidential information, if at any point in time there was a concern about performance management or any issues, because the CEO has access to a lot of confidential information and not everyone is aware of it. So if at any point in time there was a concern, you go and get legal advice at the time around the issue.
This relates to if the mayor chose one of the officers to act as the CEO and he was under performance management by the CEO. That's the context of what we're
Yes.
talking about.
And even in the initial stages of performance management, that person may not even know. So they could come across as something like a NUC, regardless it's a code of conduct breach. But we have to be very careful, like that person may not even know that they, it's in an initial stage of performance management. Yes, and then therefore, like if they were acting and they did get into that position, any information that does come across their desk, they have to be mindful of that confidential information and not interfere with any investigation, especially if it's about them. That would be worst case scenario. Capturing your views.
Any questions, councillors? Views? Councillor Miller?
I'd just like to raise that through this time. I'm not quite sure where this concern has come from, whether it was because it was an unknown delegation that none of us knew about, because I didn't know about it. Sorry. Or is it because it's a process gap? I believe that we don't have a process gap because every time we've had an appointment of an acting CEO, it's always come to council every single time. So I don't believe that even though that delegation was there, it has always come through the respect, and that is that respect and trust and process as well that we have amongst us as councillors. So I do appreciate that even though it was there. Did you know the delegation was there?
I was aware that the mayor had some powers in this space, yeah.
But you chose to bring it back to us. Yeah, and I thank you for that.
I think there are, I can understand the concern that the mayor does have that overriding power. I think there are serious concerns leaving it to the floor of council alone, particularly around supporting the CEO in his management of the organisation and of the exec. There will no doubt at times be instances where the CEO is managing aspects of an executive or the organisation, and to bring someone who is in those circumstances into that role of CEO or acting CEO. I mean, it's a minefield for them. You know, if let's say they're under investigation or they're under performance management, how do they discern what information they're not meant to read until they read it? And generally, in circumstances before an acting CEO is appointed, if the CEO is away, conversations would be had between the Mayor and CEO to discuss that and make sure that there was in some form of agreement. So those issues can be dealt with in those conversations, and minefields can be avoided. The other concern I have is that when it is solely up to the floor of council, then it creates a scenario where there might be a desire from some within the exec to sort of, for want of a better word, buddy up with, you know, a number of councillors or enough councillors to get a majority, so that in the event of a vote coming to the floor, they would be seen as the preferred applicant. And keeping that politics out of the organisation, I think, is an important thing. We often hear, you know, that councillors shouldn't be involved in operational matters. We get that rammed down our throat all the time. But I think there's also a reciprocal arrangement and a reciprocal responsibility for staff not to be involved in, you know, the political matters or the political arm, and to be very, very aware that the relationships they have with councillors needs to be professional. So it's a minefield. I understand why the delegation was given. You know, we've had an instance where I think you were away on a couple of days, was it? And, you know, we just utilised the delegation for a short period of time. And, you know, even if we continued on with the delegation and an acting CEO was appointed for a period of time, there is always the option for councillors to bring a notified motion to a council meeting if they feel that that appointment has dragged on too long, or, you know, there needs to be a change of procedure. So there's checks and balances there in all of this. And as Councillor Milne pointed out, it comes down to how the Mayor wishes to administer that delegation. And I've always seen that let's take it to the floor and you know, and get council's view. But so I know staff are looking for some views, councillors. So without any views, they're not sure which way to move forward. I've got Councillor Fredman and then Councillor Waldock.
One person. We finished debating. One person who is elected and who should know more than everyone else combined, it's the Mayor. And these are critical appointments. I'm 100% behind the concept of the Mayor having the powers that he has, because he has the knowledge that he has because of his position. And he's the fall guy if it all goes wrong as well. So it's good that it's it's good that it is that way, but it also has to be that way. The other thing I'd like to point out is the relationship between the Mayor and CEO is the most critical relationship in the whole council. So the person has to be, as far as possible, in the confidence of the Mayor, and that's the only way this place can operate well. So I'm not seeking any change to what we do.
Is there any other views, Councillor Smith?
No, I just think Councillor Fredman's spot on. Agree totally.
Yeah. So you, Councillor Polly?
Which?
No.
No, sorry. Sorry, in Councillor Devereux's absence, can somebody reiterate why he brought this? Because I was still confused about it. Was he more concerned about it all sat with, so not you, but the position of the Mayor? And so somebody that wasn't as amenable as you could more run the show more authoritarian-like and abuse those powers? Is that what he was concerned about? Because he wanted to bring it back to...
Maybe that was, I guess we can't sort of speak for him. Yeah. But even in those circumstances, you know, you have a delegation that has been given by council. A delegation can be removed by council. So if there was a different person in this chair that wasn't, you know, as flexible and wanted to be more dictatorial, council can bring a notified motion. to the floor for consideration and discussion, and they can vote to remove the delegation and appoint another delegation, or remove it in totality. So it's not like the mayor has, you know, and they could actually call a special meeting.
Yeah, it's awesome.
If they weren't happy to wait for the normal meeting cycle, they could call a special meeting. So there's no, yes, the mayor has the delegation, but effectively in a period of 5 days it can be removed under our standing orders. So it's not like you've got this opportunity for extended tyranny if you are not going to utilise the delegations lawfully and appropriately. So I'm not sure what the concern was behind it. Councillor Baldock?
Now, I believe it's because, sorry, through the chair, I believe it's because it's a panel of councillors selected by council that appoints the new CEO or CEO. So I believe he would like to see the acting CEO selected the same way. But when it's a short-term acting CEO, it's fine through the mayor, but it's at what point do you get the council board to select an acting CEO over a long period of time where we, for example, we don't have a seated CEO.
I guess that's a conversation that councillors have during the process. Yeah.
What was interesting is when you said that any councillor can put through a motion, and that's fine with me. I mean, like, it's still a democracy, it's still a democratic decision, and we can step in at any point with a motion. So, yeah, that point's covered anyway.
Do you wish to add something, Councillor Jensen?
Just a little bit, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Not yet.
I can see up your nose, Robert.
Okay. These are the perks of the job.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, for me it's not so much about your delegation, you involved us anyway. My concern with an acting CEO is about the length of time that we have one for. Like, I believe it was too long this time. It doesn't give your staff stability when everything's acting, you know. So I think we should consider the length of time that we have that gap for before we choose someone.
Well, I think that was just part of the process that we went through, and councillors were advised along the way, and you know, we may have differing opinions on that, and I guess it's just that will be for councillors to decide at the time. But hopefully, we're not in those circumstances for another number of years.
Yes.
Any other questions for councillors? Do you guys need any more understanding of councillors' view?
We're getting the overall direction is that we're happy with the status quo at this juncture.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 1.3, caretaker period policy. Then back over to Mr. Hatch again.
Come back to us.
Yeah, there's a presentation. I sent it through to you.
It's on the agenda, isn't it?
This is the one.
Sure, it'll be on the agenda.
Is this a new thing? You've got to stand.
I like it.
Right.
We used to stand.
You like?
No.
They used to stand every time we spoke around the boardroom as well. I remember sitting in there and it's all stand up. It's great.
Sorry, I'm not sure this is how they work.
Is it from the... I can't make that agenda. Isn't it? It's attached, isn't it? Couldn't you just do it through the agenda?
Wasn't linked onto the info council.
Oh, it's at the bottom of it.
If we can go to item
I mean, it's in there. It's still via attachment.
If you can go down, Christine, just see if it's down in the attachment.
Yeah, it is. It's attachment too.
Might be on the key drive.
Through the chair is suggesting that perhaps now that Andre's in the room, we can do that item. If you have a trouble with this one, would that make sense?
Yeah, right. We'll move on to item 1.1, the draft arts and cultural strategy. I'll hand over to staff.
I'll follow that. I'll just through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I have Kelly O'Neill with me today and Andre Stark, who are going to cover some salient points regarding this report. As Council would be aware, we have an operational target to prepare a new draft arts and cultural strategy. This report has been to Council in a couple of variations. We've now done the majority of the community consultation. I will take the report as read, but I will hand over to Ms Stark to present the relevant points that came out of that.
Good morning, Mr Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Yes, today we are bringing the arts and cultural strategy and revised public art policy back to you following consultation. Essentially today in our presentation we'll cover off on 3 key points. We'll go over the community consultation process with you, the key findings from that consultation and the proposed changes to the arts and cultural strategy and public art policy. So just a little bit of background to bring you up to where we are. As councillors would be aware, as our Director mentioned, the Gympie Regional Council Corporate Plan 22-27 identified the finalisation and implementation of a new arts and cultural strategy, new arts and cultural plan as a strategic pathway to achieving Council's visions and priorities. So the staff have developed an arts and cultural plan in the context of other documents. Namely, we had an existing arts and cultural plan, 2015 to 225. In 2020, there was a formal review done of that arts and cultural plan, which really led staff and the councillors to saying that we needed a new plan. So that draft strategy and the revised public art policy was brought to councillors on the 10th of May. Following our presentation to councillors, we took on board your feedback at that time, and then we took the revised documents out to community consultation between the 14th of June and 30th of July. So the consultation objectives were fourfold. Firstly, we wished to provide the community with an overview of the draft strategy. We sought and collected feedback on the draft cultural vision, the strategic outcomes and the priorities that are in the strategy. We gathered some suggested actions for the first 1 to 2 years. So really we were saying to the community, what are the most important projects or activities that you'd like to see in the arts and cultural space in the next 2 years? And finally, we sought feedback on the public art policy. Again, councillors, that was an existing policy which we revised and took out to the community to ensure that it was meeting current needs. The consultation methods that we used are outlined here. We had an online survey. We also printed surveys for people. We did 10 face-to-face drop-in sessions across the region, including Kandanga, Inland, Mary, Cuba, Rainbow Beach, and the other places outlined on the screen for you. We had an online consultation session for those people who prefer to engage online. We did a consultation station set up at the regional gallery. And finally, one of the key pieces of our consultation process was the Arts and Cultural Forum, which was undertaken at the Pavilion in July. We also promoted the Have Your Say through a range of promotional tools such as flyers, social media, electronic media, stakeholder invitations, media releases. The Have Your Say material was made available with all the invitations that were sent out to stakeholders on Council's website, and we had printed it at a range of locations across the region. In terms of the ultimate participation then in the Have Your Say process, there was a total of 142 participants throughout the process. So that was made up through our online survey. We had a few written, 2 written submissions. There's 68 online survey submissions, another 10 on the printed versions. We had 2 residents take the time to actually do full submissions of their own. We had drop-in sessions at the Arts and Cultural Forum, which brings us to that figure of 142. Officers are satisfied with that participation. We see it as satisfactory for the arts and cultural strategy. The level of detail and information that was provided through these mechanisms was ample, and people gave quite in-depth contributions which staff could work with. We had a range of people across the region participating, so you'll see out from the Cooloola Coast up to the north near the Irvine, coming down to Gomerri and to the south of our region. So we're satisfied that we did have a reach across the region in terms of participating in this consultation. In terms of who participated, again, a broad range. We had First Nations cultural advisors, musicians, DJs, visual artists, venue workers, community members and community groups, creative arts groups, theatre performers and local writers and media organisations. So we feel that across the disciplines in the arts sector, we felt that we had significant contribution from those areas. In terms of the age of the participants, we see mainly in the central area here for the 45 to 64-year-olds here, which is reflective of our region's demographic. So in terms of the key findings from the consultation process, overall, there was support for the draft cultural the draft cultural vision, with 59% of survey respondents providing support or strong support. In terms of the strategic outcomes that are in the strategy, all outcomes achieved at least 63% support or strong support, with some outcomes receiving 73%. In terms of the public art policy, again, overall support, 67% of respondents provided support or strong support. So that was just through the survey data. This was further analysed at the Arts and Cultural Forum, where people gave face-to-face input about what the vision and outcomes should be. We also gave the community opportunities to express what their key priorities were for arts and culture, and these are the key findings that came through. Just for councillors' information, you will have got the comprehensive consultation report as part of the documentation today. I think it came to about 58 pages, so there's a lot of raw data there for you to review if you wish to do so, and staff have distilled this down for the presentation for today. So the key findings were the reopening of the Gympie Civic Centre as the cultural and community space as a matter of urgency. That was the clearest and strongest message throughout the entire consultation process. The need for performing arts venues and community and cultural hubs, the need for improved communications and networking, the need for improved and more inclusive event marketing and promotions, the importance of creating more public art reflecting regional character. So that's public art for, with and by the community. Public art was mentioned a lot throughout the consultation process, which you'll see in the comprehensive consultation report. There was also community priorities around improved processes, equipment and management, and support for council-run venues and events, providing more opportunity for local artists and a more regional, decentralised focus. So that's acknowledging that we are a big region, ensuring that council's investment and opportunity raising is shared across the region. So then moving to what we are doing with those key findings. So the key changes that were suggested by residents and stakeholders are as follows. Firstly, while there was broad support for the draft cultural vision, people said they would like it to be more creative, more dynamic, and emphasise collaboration and a sense of place more. In terms of the strategic outcomes, there were minor changes to the wordings in outcomes 1, 2 and 3. There was more significant suggested changes for strategic outcome 5 in terms of acknowledging a broad range of regional identities and, importantly, natural, built and cultural heritage. People were keen to see more of that in the strategy. They also wished us to expand the priorities under strategic outcome 2, which related to the arts and creative sector. And finally, there were no proposed changes to the revised public art policy, which is why the policy that you received in your pack today is essentially the same as what you received back in May. So then the proposed changes, so following the consultation process and staff distilling all of the feedback down to those key priorities, we then went through the strategy to amend it, which is what we're bringing to councillors today. So in terms of the cultural vision, as I mentioned, there was quite a lot of feedback at the Arts and Cultural Forum around the vision. So this is the vision that was taken to consultation through June and July. So the Gympie region is alive with creativity, arts and culture, celebrating where we've come from, who we are, and inspiring what the region can be. The proposed version that we're bringing to councillors today, again, just reminding that people want it to be more dynamic, more active, talk about collaboration and be more active going forward. So what we've come up with is creativity and culture connect and empower us, celebrating our stories, our people and our places. Together, we see what the Gympie region can be and we create it. Let me just ponder that for a moment. I could do it more theatrically if you'd like.
What was it? It was the song.
I'm happy to do some dance to go. So that's the cultural vision that we're proposing for council's consideration. In terms of the strategic outcomes, we've put up in red here on the screen, councillors, those parts that have been amended. So the First Nations, the first strategic outcome, First Nations arts and culture is recognised, celebrated and embraced, was what the feedback came through the community. In terms of the second outcome, our local creative and cultural sector is valued and thriving, such as the insertion of and cultural sector. In terms of the third strategic outcome, our community is actively engaged as participants, advocates and co-creators. So what the stakeholders were telling us is they want it to be not so passive as an audience coming to see a show or an audience seeing an art exhibition and being the audience. It was more around our community being participants and advocates and being actively engaged, which officers were highly supportive of. No changes to strategic outcome 4, which relates to our places and spaces buzzing with creative activation. Most of the changes came in the outcome 5. So it now reads, our regional identities, meaning that we have more than one identity, and diverse natural, built and cultural heritage are acknowledged, protected and shared. So there was a lot of discussion in terms of acknowledging that our natural environment very much shapes our creativity and our culture and our art. So whether that be out in the west or at the beach or in the city centre, that shapes our creative outputs, and also acknowledging our heritage needs to be acknowledged and protected. In terms of the priorities that sit within the strategy, there have been a number of changes to the priorities which are outlined in the report package with you today. Those changes have been, in some cases, simply a reordering of the priorities, because some people felt that some needed to be higher up. There has been some revision to the wording, but not really a change to the intent. However, there are some new priorities with new wording based on feedback through the community consultation process. So councillors, the next steps before us now is to refine the strategy based on your feedback today, and then present the public art policy and the strategy to yourselves for endorsement at the ordinary meeting on the 25th of October, so this month. So councillors, over to you for any questions or queries that you'd like to.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Polly?
If there's a question, just your last slide there, you seem to be, no, go back one. Yeah, that one. No, the the Venn diagram. Whatever that was.
Circles.
The 5 cell. I suppose I'm just looking at it going, you seem to be really keen on involving everybody in this, which is nice, but it's like asking everybody in Gympie to contribute to a comedy night. And clearly some people don't have a sense of humour at all, so, and I don't. I'm not arty. You wouldn't ask me to co-create something,
and,
you know.
And that's through you, Mr. Mayor. That's perfectly fine, councillor.
And I think actually Miss Duck, the art world is pleased.
We've always come with open arms, councillor. Never too late. Never too late. I hear you, councillor, in that there are some people who simply wish to come along and have a great night out, be entertained and inspired by what they experience, which can very much happen through all of these processes. For here, our community actively engaged could be that they come along and sit and have a great time and really laugh their heads off at the comedy. So I don't think that it it is forcibly making people.
Okay, I got hung up on the co-creator. Yeah, that's what I was looking at going.
The co-creator one?
I'll participate, but that's it. Yeah.
Interestingly, so some people found the word co-creator that didn't really sit well with them, but some other people in the community are like, yeah, we really want to co-create together. So in the sector, it's to ensure that the content that we're receiving, so the plays, the music, the exhibitions that we see in our gallery, connect with people. And so I'll give you a great example. So the High Arts exhibition at the gallery, and also the 25th anniversary exhibition that we have at the gallery, citizens were invited to participate if they wished to. So some people love being able to go to the gallery and see their artwork on display. So for them, they get a real kick out of that. But it gives it that deeper meaning for our community, that what you are seeing is actually reflecting our people, our stories, and our place. So that's what that kind of goes to in terms of that co-creation.
And one final question is way back.
Yes.
You talked about an objective about inclusive marketing or promotion, or that's it, bottom one need
Yes.
group. Because this is where sometimes these words, okay, what do you mean by inclusive? Because what you're thinking, what I'm thinking, it could be two different things.
Agree, and this has been distilled right down. There was a few other words there that I actually took out as well because I had some of the questions. Really what that goes to is ensuring that however we communicate to the community, we do it as broadly and as inclusively as we can. So we need to make sure that we invite targeted stakeholders as well as the general community, make sure that the news about the events is getting to Gomerri as well as Themeline and the Cooler Coast, that we're using digital platforms as well as flyers. In some cases, if it's a community hall that's putting on a touring show, we will letterbox drop that area. So we need to find a whole range of marketing and promotional tools that will make our promotion as inclusive as possible. Councils be aware that we are in a digital world, but there are a great many people in our region who don't have great connectivity. So if we rely too heavily on social media, it's not going to get through. But equally, there's a whole lot of people that the only source of information they get is now through digital means. So it makes a tricky task for our communications team, but we're committed to working with them, but also with the sector in asking the sector to help us spread the word about these events.
Might I say the communication from council recently has been fantastic. So we're on the right track.
Nods to the communications team.
Councillor Fredman, this will be your realm.
Well, we've got a bit of work to do, Mr Mayor, because the commitment to protect our built heritage doesn't seem to align with the powers we've got under our planning scheme. And of course, I'm insisting the Outridge House loss. So how do we handle that conflict between what you've got there and the planning scheme?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we had quite a lot of discussion around the word protect and conserve. It is a strong word, the word protect.
I don't disagree. I think the planning side of things is the one that has to lift, not your side of it.
And through you, Mr Mayor, that's actually the answer, Councillor. The planning scheme will use this document as adopted as a reference document and will reflect that there is a desire to protect cultural heritage. And as the workshops have been undertaken on the planning scheme with the policy papers that we're preparing, this matter is being attempted to be reflected in that documentation in order that we can protect the cultural heritage where we can. And there are some changes that we'll be making to the planning scheme, hopefully, that will reflect strengthening this space. But that's where it sits. It sits more in the planning scheme requirement than this policy and strategy requirement.
Any other questions, comments, councillors? Councillor Mill?
Just when I've just got my thought patterns going, because there is, conserve and protect physically, actually keeping the heritage there. But there's also probably, arts and culture, when you look at your will, it's so diverse where we're looking. So that inclusiveness probably goes across so many where you're targeting that all the time. So is it more about, not just the physical, but also protecting those, what we have in the vision, like the stories, and even actually having those memories still acknowledged and protected and shared over time, even if we can't physically protect sometimes because of other factors. is that some of the, where we're going from that point of view as well, because it's that acknowledgement through that heritage art.
I'm also thinking, thank you, councillor, through Mr Mayor, in terms of the work that the library does, in terms of Voices of the Valley, etc. So that's the keeping of those stories alive through archival purposes and bringing them to life. Yes, certainly that's a conservation element. Do councillors have a view on whether you'd like to keep protect or swap that out for conserve?
I'm happy with protect. That's just
I voted for protect all this one.
I'll protect. I think it's strong.
On that basis, so.
On that basis, leave it in.
Yep.
No, I was just clarifying.
Any other questions, comments, councillors? Is there any more, councillor Mills?
I'm just going back because I was at the forum, and that was, I have to say, for those that weren't there, it was a very, very open and in-depth discussion on the plan moving forward. And I have to say, with the version, I didn't know what you were going to come back with because the feedback from it. And I have to say, I mean, it's all words and everything's going to be perfect. But I think you have really hit on some of the bigger issues that I heard there. And I think one I got here is Empower Us, which is the Connected Empower, because there's, art and culture and challenge and, all of that invocation that you can do through this. And it was also about that historic elements, but celebrating our stories. So it's so broad, you can go with that, and it's all the people, so that's all inclusiveness. And it's how we can actually move together, we can see, and where we can make it happen, which is almost like a vision of action in our vision statement. So, whether we can mould it again or if it's going to please everybody, but I do believe that you've hit a lot of what I heard from that forum in what you're proposing here today. So I congratulate you on that. The only other thing that I would like to point out that was in the report is some of the community key issues, and it was a concern and lack of trust in council's commitment and capacity to deliver the strategy, and community concern that the feedback will not be genuinely represented in the revised strategy. From what I know, I believe you're trying to hit some of those in those pathways of priorities that are in the strategy. What I heard, an intent of a strategy is really have some key lines in there that you can actually inject what you want to get out of them. So it's not actually hitting everything we need to do as a creative community, but have the enabler within the plan to be able to tap into that with your actions. So when I read it, I'm not obviously in the creative world, but I think you've hit a lot of that in the feedback. So I'm hoping that community concern is out a bit. I'm just hoping that we can come through now and actually come through and deliver on it. So that's just some of the feedback I had from being at the forum.
Any other comments, questions, councillors? Is there anything more you require, Mr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So thank you for the feedback today, councillors. On that basis, my understanding is then broadly we're comfortable with the proposals that staff have brought back. And on that note, we will then bring the public art policy and the strategy back for your final consideration and endorsement, or your final consideration on the 25th of October.
Thank you. We'll go back to item 1.3.
Okay. Through you, Mr Mayor, talking this morning about the draft caretaker policy or period policy. There's been a lot of questions by staff and different councillors time to time about what can and can't happen, and so we had a look and thought it would be best to draft a caretaker period policy so everyone was aware of there are restrictions under the legislation, and we'll go through those, but also the perception that council monies is not being put into places they shouldn't be during that period, and that business as usual can still occur through that period. So we'll just go through the policy and the slideshow. So we'll go through the purpose, the background, we will look at the legislative restrictions, other conditions, and then capturing your views before we bring the policy back to council. So in the policy statement's probably the best to read out. And as I said, there are a number of legislative restrictions and it provides the legislation in there, but applicants should take particular care in any campaign activity to ensure that there can be no possible perception of council-provided resources being used for electoral benefit. So we're trying to stop that perception and also make sure that council staff and everyone's on board with the same view. Okay, next one. So the caretaker period is determined by the Electoral Commission, and at this time the predicted date is 29th of January, but that has not been confirmed, so it'll be in January, early February sometime. And the period will extend until the election's been confirmed. Up on the screen you have the legislative restrictions, and it's mostly about implementing any new major policy decisions. So anything that is continuing on that has already occurred and gone through council, it's anything new. You can't be doing anything new. Council meetings will occur, and we've got a new schedule for next year which will be coming up soon, but the meetings and regular actions of business still has to occur. Talks about electoral material and electoral signage. I'm going to get dizzy looking at this, ladies. Okay, go down a little bit. Keep going down. Actually, we'll put a fact sheet out about electoral signage soon. Yeah, so we look at use of resources, council activities, civic and community events. Of course, we still want to see you out and about talking to the community, but it's just about council's involvement in that too. Community grants, we'll be particularly careful around during this time. And sponsorships, it's always there. For council staff, we have had a lot of questions about council staff because they're all keen to get policies and work coming through, but they also have to be aware of the time frame, so this will all be set through this policy. Media releases, of course, that also has impacts, and also on our website and social media, just making sure that there is a bit more control around what the content, so that we are meeting the legislative requirements. There's a fact sheet that was provided in the link from the department, but I think it says everything that the department came and talked to you about, as well as nothing really new. But we just thought it would be more beneficial for everyone to have it in a policy, and so it's presented to you for capturing your views today and then presented again at the October meeting. Any questions or views on it?
Questions, councillors? Comments for staff?
Yes.
Councillor Polly?
I'm trying to understand, so talked previously about fact sheets going out, like on the council of Division 7 and stage 10 of the sewers going through, so I can't be included in any promotion of that because that might be seen as promoting me as the local candidate.
So the major policy decisions of what stages have gone through, it would be if you were going to promote anything new happening or things that haven't already gone through council about that Southside sewage. That's been around for years, Southside sewage.
Okay,
so any of the decisions that have already been made by council, that's fine. It's anything you do. So say, oh, we're going to go extend it here or there. Anything that you might have in your electoral campaign, that's what you could want to be discussing.
Yep. And then
Linking it or misguiding members of the community as well about what you have the authority to do.
Yep. Just a bit it's quite relevant, but just say I'm not running for next council, I can do what I like pretty much because I'm not electioneering, whereas somebody else who's maybe really hamstrung.
You will still need to abide by it. Like as a councillor, you'll still need to make sure that it's about the resources of council too, that you're not using them in any benefit for you. So if you're not doing that activity, then that's fine.
Okay.
Any questions, comments, councillors?
I might just give another comment too, through Mr Mayor. Just been advised that the date of the local government election is now the 16th of March. So council then has to decide whether it wants to hold an ordinary meeting in the first 2 weeks of March or to apply to the Minister for an exemption. So
no meeting in March.
No, the council has to have a meeting every month. So the decision is because of the date of the elections, council has to have a meeting in that first 2 weeks of March. But it can also has the option to apply to the Minister for exemption. Under the department guidelines, they're saying council should have that meeting, even if it's just to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting.
Oh, so it's our last, as we're saying, our last meeting, because it's
Yep.
usually, the election's usually after.
Yeah, so our last meeting, because of the timing,
Yeah, Easter.
we have to have a meeting in the first 2 weeks of March.
So there's no chance of getting one in on the 4th week of March?
Because of Easter, I think, because it's usually on the 4th. Yeah, now we do the
There's
3rd.
a time frame post the election when
It
the
may not be
meetings
declared
have.
by.
Yes, I was thinking we declared, would it?
So once it's declared, you have 2 weeks to have a meeting.
Any comments, councillors? No, great.
Oh, no, I've got, no, sorry, no, of course I'll just wait. Yeah, no, well, it was the community grants one, so it just says any funding round for community grants that's open. So does that take the rolling rounds? Because that doesn't come to us, that's just CEO delegation. So I'm just thinking effect to community groups that may be applying through the rolling rounds. We don't have anything to do with those, so they would still continue. So they're not affected by this policy?
It is business as usual.
Yes, yeah.
And it goes through.
Okay, I was just clarifying whether, because it just said, it was just a bit confusing for me. So it's the council only to consider grants in the caretaker period that align with the scheduled annual program. It's got a big C. So I thought, is that us or is it the council? As in, you can delegate.
It's the organisation. Like
Yeah.
if it's business as usual through an organisation, then it goes as usual.
I'm just making sure our community groups that may want to apply in that time for the rolling rounds that don't come to us are still, this is not going to affect those applications. That was one of them. Civic or community events, so that's as a councillor, if you're a community, you do community stuff, whatever it is, you can still go and do that. You're not a representative as a councillor, you're still doing that stuff, so that's not covered by this. Yeah, but if you're representing as a councillor, it's definitely 100% covered by this because that's your civic duty. I'm just clarifying that. Numbering of all parts. I'm a big fan of numbering all parts of any policy for easy reference. So if we've got section 6, it's just got all headings and they've got all paragraphs within themselves. So I would love to see, I know it's a heap of more numbers on it, but it's just for ease of referencing when you're trying to refer to a policy. That's just my general feedback to any policy.
Sorry, I'm just not, so you're meaning that
You've got 7.
the subheadings under 5.2? Like
Yeah,
the
so
subheadings have numbers?
Yeah, and then even, I mean, I've seen them with paragraphs and numbers or, you know what I mean? It's just for an ease of reference. So I want to ask something to you and I'm going to try and explain it to you. I can just go number and you can go back to it, or anyone could for any referencing. That's just format. And the only other one was, I think there's one more line. I think it's the responsibilities. It's just got the CEO shall inform the mayor, councillors and all staff of an impending election period and restrictions that apply by no later than 2 months before the commencement of an election period.
The standard wording.
But my question is this policy would actually satisfy that responsibility inside your policy?
I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, it's just because there's only one thing under responsibilities, and I thought, well, maybe it's just the policy itself is fulfilling that responsibility because you don't know when they're going to call stuff from 2 months before. You know what I mean? I'm just some of those time frames. You know when the election is, we don't know where the caretaker period is.
Yeah, that's right.
So the policy itself fulfills that.
The policy does fulfil it, and it also provides direction for staff and direction to everyone. But that is just part of that is the responsibility that does generate this policy.
Yeah, that's all. I just don't want to lock the CEO into something that may not be possible. But if it's just the policy is hitting what that actually is, then he's fulfilled it.
But often there's a lot of things that come across the desk that the CEO is responsible for. This policy will not stop that if there's extra duties or extra things that he has to do.
Oh no, it just says of an impending election period and restrictions that apply. So the policy is outlining all the restrictions that apply for that pending election period.
Yes.
So the policy hits number 6. So that's all it's defining is I don't want to lock him into something that I'm like, can he do that in that time frame? I don't know, but the policy will. So that's clarifying. Thank you.
Councillor Polly.
Yeah, sorry to split hairs, but just thinking of, there's a number of councillors that own a council-issued car. So as I understand it, they can't use that car for promotional or electioneering purposes, but they're paying a fee to use it for private purposes. How do you know it's not a private purpose for a council?
Well, that's a trust and code of conduct issue probably. You wouldn't be those decisions have already been made to give you a council car. Would be my take on it. But if you are seen doing other things, well, then we would have to have a talk to you about that, because you're not allowed to do certain acts under the legislation for the purpose of electoral, like going through elections.
Yeah,
So it would be at the time, and it would just be discussions, but that's why care has to be taken about what you're doing or perceived. There is that word perceived, about what the community perceives. But the council cars and everything that's already provided to you, that's all been decided already.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. And things like I've got a council issued printer.
Yeah.
So I couldn't print off electioneering material off that, but I could go to the library and pay 20 cents for every sheet I put through, because that's what the public can do.
As long as the council are not paying for that electoral.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
But how does, in relation to the point Councillor Polly raised regarding the car, if councillors are paying a fee for private use, and I don't have a council car, wouldn't, going to a, meet the candidate forum be considered a private use activity?
That's what I'm thinking.
Because they're paying a fee, to do that, to use it for private use.
Yeah, I think if...
I understand the difference between, wrapping it in stickers and, but I struggle to understand how you can split hairs around that and say, look, you can actually drive it, you can't drive it to the event, but if you're going to do the shopping after that and you've paid for private use, you can drive it to the shopping centre after that.
My take on it would be that it is not in the public interest even to be splitting hairs about that sort of thing. Like, it's something that is not value for money to discuss or investigate or anything like that. If it did come up, the car has been provided to you during your period as in private use, like you say, that would be fine.
Any other questions or input, councillors? Great, thank you, Ms Hatch. We have item 1.4, the procurement panel. Is that you again, Mr Lewis?
Through Mr Mayor, morning councillors. Unfortunately, Ms Hatherill and Mr Harrop are away today, so you have me to present this report. This report presents an update from the procurement panel for August 2023, and under the agreed changes to our processes with council. This report looks at approvals by the panel that did not exceed the CEO's financial delegations, with those procurements being brought back to a full council meeting. Happy to take the report as read, but would like to note item B refers to an error that was reported to council, where there was a ground maintenance that was reported at around 55,000, inclusive of GST. That amount was exclusive of GST. And the other item, just for council's interest, item D, enterprise access security, actually refers to our building security access systems. In case council had any would like to know what that item was about.
Questions, councillors? To the report, Councillor Smith.
Can I ask a question about a previous procurement report?
Look, we should, if the
Stick to
question
subject,
should
okay.
relate to this one, if you could just email that to the CEO.
Yes, sir. No worries, sir.
We could deal with it that way. Thank you. Councillor Mill?
So just on that, because these publish these workshop agendas, are we just going to have this as an attachment to anything that comes to? That's fine. Just for transparency, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Thank you, Mr Lewis. We will have a short break before we continue with section 2, the council briefing. Thank you.
Okay, so how long is this morning? Oh, I looked at the time and went, there is no way I can make that work. It's too early.